Hi all, welcome to MeDIDa, a podcast analysing all sorts of media about multiplicity and dissociative identity disorder. We're talking books, movies, television, gaming and beyond. Whether it's overt or covert, intentional or unintentional, I want to talk about it. I'm your podcast host, Hachette. I'm a fully fused system, which means my multiplicity is no longer compartmentalized. And I'm constantly intrigued by the way that media that isn't intentionally trying to represent plurality almost always does a better job of it compared to media that is actively setting out to represent it. This podcast is not necessarily a place that is here to educate about DID, multiplicity, and plurality. If you want educational content about plurality, there are several other places you can find it, both online and offline. This is specifically a place to review and analyze media. So if you, like me, have opinions on things, stick around and join in the discussion. This podcast is recorded on Kaurna country, and I extend my respect to the traditional custodians of the land and the elders past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded. This is still stolen land without any Indigenous treaty. The land I am on impacts how I go about my day-to-day life, including my media analysis, so this acknowledgement of country is important. Today is another very special episode as we are discussing Dr. Jeni Haynes' book, The Girl in the Green Dress. I also got the opportunity to talk with Dr. Jeni Haynes and ask so many questions that I had pinging around in my brain about both the book and the recent documentary, so stay tuned for that. Jeni and I spoke for so long that it won't all fit into this episode, so we will be doing a second episode discussing the Are Jeni documentary with the second half of the conversation. If you would like to skip straight to the interview and skip my review, go to 9 minutes and 14 seconds. The Girl in the Green Dress is a memoir published in 2022 by Hachette Australia, and it is co-written by Dr. George Blair-West, who treated Jeni for many years. It has also recently been released as an audiobook narrated by Jeni Haynes and all of the alters that speak within the book. This book chronicles Jeni's life, including the abuse she experienced at the hands of her father throughout her childhood, and how this childhood formed her complex system of over 2,500 alters, and goes on to tell the journey of justice, holding her father legally accountable for his crimes, as well as Jeni's healing journey. In the dedications within the book, several of Jeni's alters speak, as well as subsystems, which are in themselves entities within the system that are made up of specific alters. These dedications, I feel like, really emphasize the meaning behind the story and why it was important for this story to be told. For example, Jennifer Margaret Linda, who is listed as the original child, dedicated the book to Symphony, who was the first alter created and the one that then went on to create all of the other alters within the system. And then Symphony also has her own dedications within this book to all of the heroes that helped her throughout the journey of justice, as well as all of the alters. I really do feel like the way that the dedication has so many different dedications from so many different alters really does emphasize the fact that all of these members of Jeni's system are different people, are different entities within themselves, and have different people that they want to dedicate this work to. And I find that absolutely beautiful and so deeply touching. This book is incredibly powerful and confronting and authentic. Multiple alters speak about their experiences through the book, each titled with their name or collective name, if it's a group of alters. Something that is worthwhile to mention is that Jeni's system has incredible recall ability, which is not necessarily common in people with DID, where the structural dissociation and dissociative amnesia generally results in poorer memory and recall. Because Jeni is able to recall so much with incredible clarity, this memoir is quite detailed, beginning in very early childhood and stretching to life beyond the final court trial. There is so much in this book that I could talk about, as there is so much powerful lived experience being represented here, but I do just want to point out a few of my favourite moments. One of the first is when full awareness of the alters comes through to the front, something that could be described as co-consciousness perhaps, which occurs when Jeni is put on a new kind of medication. Previously, while there had been a certain level of co-consciousness consistently within the system, there had never been this amount of total awareness all at once, and the sheer amount of alters within the system was incredibly overwhelming. And I love the way that this is described, so I'll read it out. I could hear the different accents, arguments, and children crying. It was like waking up from a deep sleep in the middle of a Westfield shopping centre on Boxing Day. It's just such a fantastic description of how full awareness can be so totally overwhelming. And just the magnitude of it. The amount of people that it was a shopping centre on Boxing Day. And for people that don't know, Boxing Day is the day after Christmas, where often if the shops are open, there are sales happening because it's just after Christmas. Another moment comes when Jeni integrates, or fuses as is the more common term now, almost fully fusing. Again, I'll read the description from the book because I found it deeply beautiful and moving. The treatment wasn't about getting rid of alters or switching them off. It was about combining them in harmony. And it was a magical process of self-love. I love that so much. I love that description of it being a magical process of self-love. While Jeni's system ultimately doesn't remain fused, choosing to separate and largely remain separate, I do really appreciate the description of fusion as harmony and self-love, as it feels true to my own experience. Jeni's experience of quietness after fusion does not necessarily align with my own personal experience. However, as Jeni puts it, integration, or fusion, is intensely personal, and so each person with MPD/DID will do it differently. As a fully fused system, I do find that there is a lot of vitriol within multiple communities about the idea of fusing, which is understandable due to the history of it being pushed on systems as the only viable healing method. However, the extreme reactions towards full fusion can leave many systems who do choose it feeling abandoned by the community. And so I think that with more people sharing their experiences of what fusion is like for them, we can start to acknowledge and accept that each multiple is on their own personal healing journey. The final part I would like to draw attention to is the ending of the book, which I think is so incredibly powerful and so full of love. So I'll read it out. My alters are my world, my family, the people who've cared for me the most. Now it's my turn to look after them. I'm ready to watch them grow up and have fun and live freely. They've paid the price for my freedom, and it's only fair they should get to enjoy it with me. I am the sum of my parts, and my parts are absolutely phenomenal. To the girl in the green dress, I have one thing to say. Thank you. For many multiples, being able to recognize the way that each part of the system has helped us to survive can be difficult, and loving all of them can be even more difficult when some of the alters feel particularly at odds with who we are and how we think. I think that this ending is a marvelous display of achieving a state of appreciation for all alters and living a life that is functionally multiple. I will briefly mention my one qualm with the book, which is more of a minor nitpick, but something that I had a very strong emotional reaction to. And it's some of the sections written by Dr. George Blair-West. Dr. Blair-West is self-admittedly not an expert in DID. He says as much in the book and also explains that Jeni taught him much about the condition during their sessions together. However, he often writes with extreme confidence about DID, and sometimes states questionable information as if it were fact, or information that is specific to Jeni's system as if it's a universal plural experience. While a lot of what he has written in the book is useful insight, enough of it is not that I often found his sections distressing to read. However, that's just my personal opinion and take on the matter. Regardless, I do not think his inclusion at all distracts from Jeni's own story within the book, so I would still highly recommend reading The Girl in the Green Dress. Before I give my final thoughts and rating of the memoir, we are going to cut over to a special interview with the incredible Dr. Jeni Haynes. Part 1. Just some quick content warnings before we get into the interview. While Jeni and I have attempted to make this discussion as minimally triggering as possible, we do still discuss triggering matters such as childhood abuse, childhood torture, childhood neglect, childhood sexual assault, incest, rape, not being believed and gaslighting, victim blaming, systemic abuses and injustices, legal injustices, silencing, ableism, medical abuse, suicide baiting, false accusations, the false memory syndrome and the false memory syndrome foundation, and Billy Milligan. The YouTube version of this podcast contains visual content warnings for each section of the interview, so please go over to the Hachette YouTube channel to view that if you need to. Please ensure that you are keeping yourself and your systems safe. Thank you so much for coming on to my little podcast today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dr. Jeni Haynes, most frequently known as Jeni.
And would you like to share who is around right now?
Okay, well, as I say, I'm Jeni Haynes. I live with multiple personalities and dissociated identities. I have 2,682 separate alters, all of which are floating around at the moment going, "Ooh, time to talk." Yes. And everybody's around to give you answers and information and whatever you might need as we go through this. But
that's a lot of
being a
co-consciousness.
multiple. Yeah, this is the thing. I'll get it out right from the start. I know that the modern term is dissociative identity disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't resonate for me in the same way that multiple personality disorder resonates, because my alters are very clearly different people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easier for me to call myself MPD than DID. And Muscles has a line, "I'm not a did, I was a done too."
I do like that line.
Yeah, that he's been yelling that from the moment they changed it to did. He just went, "No, I was a done too." And the thing is, everybody with MPD or DID was a done too.
Mm-hmm. That's
Can't
so
be one without it having been done too.
Yeah, that is the unfortunate reality.
It is, isn't it? So right now you're talking to the entity currently known as Jeni.
Mm-hmm.
I am the creation from last night where everybody decided what information we were going to need to do today. And so they've all jumped into the suitcase and voila, I am here with most of what I think we're going to need. And then if other things are requested or other information is requested, people will just jump in and out.
Mm-hmm.
We are all co-conscious, and so we know, everybody knows what's going on, so it's nice and simple. If you need them, they'll rock up.
Brilliant. I love that. So you have written a book co-written with Dr. George Blair-West called The Girl in the Green Dress, which I have a copy of, and you also were the star of the documentary We Are Jeni.
Yes.
And I love both of these, the book and the documentary. Absolutely adore them. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and why you felt so compelled to share it?
Okay. I experienced extreme abuse and torture as a little girl. And it started before I was a year old, and it went through until I was 14. I was forced to keep it secret, which meant I wasn't protecting myself. I ended up protecting my abuser, because my inability to disclose, which was borne by threats of violence towards my siblings, my mother, the pets.
Mm-hmm.
That actually protected my abuser. It didn't protect me, and it certainly didn't protect my siblings or my mother or my pets.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the line that abusers use to keep you quiet. He told me that if I said anything, my abuser was my father, my biological father.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that if I told anybody what happened, he'd kill my siblings. If I told my mother, she would burn to death in a case of spontaneous human combustion or have a heart attack.
Mm.
So as a little girl, I wasn't game to tell anybody. which I'm not going to get into because I don't want to trigger any viewers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna be as minimally traumatic in what I disclose to protect your audience.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't want to be responsible for somebody else having a bad day. So my parents got a divorce in 1984, and my father left. So the abuse, in terms of physicality, the abuse ended. But by this stage, I've developed close to 2,000 alters simply to survive him. And the abuse and the mental contortions I had to go through, because he told me it was games originally. And then when I complained about his games, he turned it to punishment. So I thought I was the most evil person on the planet. Everything I have done has been to protect my family, or what I term the unknown child. Well, a number of things happened, and ultimately I went to, when my father was released from prison, he ended up having a relationship with me, which was not great. But when I terminated that, I contacted his public protection officer, his PPO. Now, this is an English thing that allows a sex offender out into the community, but he's being monitored at all times. Well, I contacted the PPO and said, I can't be with him anymore. I need to stop. And I need you to know that he's not just a danger to teenagers. He's a danger to all children. And she said, can you write down what you've just told me and send it to me in an email? I said, sure, no problems. And she got back to me, took my report to her superiors, who said, go to the Australian police. So I went to the Australian police in 2009 to protect the unknown child. I did not go for justice for what he did to me. I went to get help for the unknown child, the next kid he finds. Well, that started a 10-year police investigation, which resulted in my dad being arrested in England in 2017. Oh, that's just beautiful. I can tell you that's beautiful. And he was brought to Australia, and he went through court in 2019. It took 8 years of police investigation before I realized that they're actually doing this not for the unknown child, they're actually doing it for me.
Yeah, it's not hypothetical.
No, it's not hypothetical. It took me 8 years to work that out. I may have multiple degrees in psychology and criminology and victimology, but I'm dim when it comes to people actually stepping out and trying to help me.
Well, when had it happened before?
Well, no. I mean, no. So we got Dad into court, and I waived my right to anonymity, which we can come back to.
Yep.
And after hearing my main altar symphony testify for an hour and 45 minutes, Dad rolled over and changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. Stop!
Yes.
The judge gave him 45 years in prison. Longest prison term for sex offences in Australia. Actually, when she gave him his original sentence, she gave him 296 years in prison.
Wow.
If you add up every sentence,
yeah,
I just said, we've gone American. And then she gave him 45 years in prison with a 33 and a third years non-parole period. He's going to die in prison.
Yeah. Which is great.
Hopefully not for a very long time. I want him to experience some of the things that I experienced in my childhood.
Yeah.
And as I say, I'm being very careful what I say because I don't want to traumatize people. But yeah, the police said it was one of the worst cases of childhood sexual abuse in Australian history, if not the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as awful as that is, as somebody who's been invalidated, as all people with MPD are, it was really good to hear that it was as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah.
Let's face it, you don't create 2,682 alters when it's abuse once every 6 years.
No, yeah.
No. But I have accomplished so much by waiving my right to anonymity, not just for me, but for other people with MPD DID who've gone to the police since me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware of 7 cases in Australia and 2 cases in New Zealand that got justice because they could use my case as a precedent.
That's amazing. I love that.
So do I. And people write to me and say, because you made it public, I've been validated, I'm going to the police tomorrow.
And yeah.
It just makes me melt. It really does. I tried to protect the unknown child. And what I've ended up doing is protecting and supporting every other person with MPD DID on the planet. Bad for a little kid who thought that they were the most evil person on the planet.
Yeah, no, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah. I must have got a reprieve from hell.
No, I do really think it's so important that you not only made yourself public, that you were not anonymous in the trial, but that you've gone on to share the story in your book and in the documentary, because it's so empowering to other people with DID or MPD, and just to see that it can happen, that you can be listened to and taken seriously, because that's something that so many of us experience, is that level of dismissal or just, outright judgment, stigma, hate.
Judgment, disbelief. Oh yes, I had so many years of that. It took such a long time before I finally found George Blair-West, who actually believed me. But up until him, I'd been begging for help. And I actually had people, psychologists and counselors, saying to me and saying to other people, can't believe a word Jeni says because she's got DID. And I'm just sitting there going, you can't get MPD or DID without a massive trauma history in which you recognize nobody is going to come to save you. You have to do it yourself. And then counselors then used your history of sex abuse to declare you a liar. So you can't get it without the sex abuse, but the minute you declare the sex abuse, they don't believe you. It's just so wrong, which is why I'm on this massive campaign to get DID and MPD recognized as legitimate responses to trauma by children who are abused before they even have the most basic of language. Symphony has said she didn't know she was only supposed to have one personality.
Yeah.
And you don't know that until you don't know that. And you only discover that you have one personality when you accomplish individuation, which occurs somewhere between the age of 5 and 8. So think about that for a minute. That implicitly declares that abuse occurred in such horrendous ways and was constant for your first 5 years of life. Well, of course you don't know you're supposed to only have one personality. You're under 5.
You don't know much.
You don't know, no. But when we went to the police in 2009, I still didn't know that what would matter would be what he'd done to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was completely oblivious. Like I said, I was completely oblivious until 2017.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a long time.
It's very understandable, though, given
Mm,
everything that you had
mm.
been through.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, because that's something that everybody who has DID or MPD needs to understand is we're not bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up in a world that actively sought to destroy us.
Mm-hmm.
How are we supposed to know what is normal, to understand that people care about us when
Yeah.
they haven't before?
And I do think it's very admirable that you were able to go to the police because I myself, I have a lot of mistrust towards any authority figures. Um, and
I
it's,
hear that.
yeah, it's just the idea of ever being able to trust an authority figure that much is astounding to me.
Yeah, I get that. My thing was, it wasn't about trust
Hmm.
for me. It was about necessity. I
Yeah.
had to protect the unknown child.
Hmm.
My father was single in the UK, um, having access to the internet, and I lived in terror of him becoming a surrogate parent to little woman from Russia
Hmm.
or from Indonesia or the Philippines or places where they were looking to, shall we say, get out of where they were living and get into the UK.
Hmm.
I was terrified he would find somebody with a baby and
Hmm.
he'd start again.
Yep.
And so my difficulties with authority and being believed mattered less for me than protecting that little Asian baby or the little Russian girl.
Hmm.
And the thing is, Dad doesn't do this to random people. No, he does this to his own family because he can control the environment.
Mm.
You're there 24/7.
Yep.
And so he's not the kind of guy that you need to worry about creepy guy on street corner. No, you need to worry about the guy that's got a wife and a baby.
Yeah.
So I gritted my teeth, and I mean it was hard. His line was, "Whatever happens to Jeni doesn't matter," but it's
Oof.
just Jeni.
But you do
Mm.
matter. You do matter so
Yeah,
much.
that's why on my posts and on my messages, and even on when I sign an autograph, I write, "You matter,"
Hmm.
because everybody matters. And sometimes survivors really need somebody to point that out and say, "Hey, you matter. And what happened to you matters." So I write that in everything.
So true.
Yeah.
Um,
People get sick of it eventually, but hey, hashtag you matter.
yeah.
Well,
Um,
with all the secrecy, I wasn't even allowed to write hashtag me too.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, because if I'd done that, the police told me that one word from me could kill the investigation.
Oh,
So,
that's horrible.
yeah, Muscles phoned the police and said, "Can you tell me what the word is?" And I promised not to say it. Word turned out to be extradition, but that's not quite what they meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been hard.
Mm. So you have been very open and honest in both the book and the documentary, sharing incredibly personal details about your life and your experience with that everyone within you has had. And I do also love that you have sections in the book that are sort of titled under different alters, where you let them have their voice to talk about their own experiences.
Mhm.
But I do want to ask, was there ever any hesitation with the amount of details that you provided? Was there any parts that were like, no, we shouldn't be sharing this? I know that's a common experience with other people, other multiples. I know that other multiples often experience that they have like if they start to talk about their experiences, there's often one or two or maybe more that sort of try to nip that in the bud and go, no, we shouldn't be talking about this. So did you ever experience any of that?
That's a really interesting question, because we didn't. We didn't have problems with disclosure. We had problems with disclosures that got edited out of the book
Ah.
by legal at Hachette.
Mm-hmm.
We struggled to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in our book, when it was the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, minus what was deleted for legal reasons.
Mm.
That was hard. So
Yeah.
there were really important discussions that got lost.
Yeah.
However, the way we negotiated this was to sit down with Muscles and say, but you said it. And it's been read by the legal team. It's been read by the editor, the publishers. It was read by every altar. You've said it.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's no longer in the book doesn't mean it's not relevant. You've testified.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't lost that growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the words that said it
Yeah.
were taken away. And it did feel very silencing. I mean, there were things that we couldn't talk about because it could cause problems to this person or that person, or there were things that we talked about where my mother got upset and my mother wanted me to change words. And you know, we were writing, the people that had problems with what we wrote weren't our alters.
Mm-hmm.
They were parts of our audience.
Yeah.
And then, you can't say that. I wrote in my book about my mother remarrying my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that I felt that my mother had never fallen out of love with my dad. And she really got upset about that. But I was like, this is my understanding of her behavior.
Yeah.
And it was important to keep it in, because I wasn't writing her perspective. I was writing mine.
Yeah.
And so in the book, we actually have bits where Mum got a chance to say her piece. And even in the documentary, we gave Mum right of reply over some of the things that were said. You know, how can your mother live in that house and not see what was going on, is a question I'm asked all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really hard question.
Mm-hmm.
But we tried to address it from my perspective. Where was your mother? She was there. Mm-hmm. She was right there. But Mum found that difficult, so we gave right a reply. And we've respected the opinions of the external world. Mm-hmm. But it was very difficult because there were things we wanted to write that we lost along the way.
Yeah.
But, and here's a big thing, a slight segue off to the side. I have just spent a week in the recording studio narrating my book.
Yes.
And everybody got to come and read their segments. You now all have access to not just the story, but the story in the voices of my alters, which I don't think's been done before.
Not that I'm aware of.
No, you know, I'm always the first person. I'm way ahead of my time. And that's fine, because if it helps, it helps, you know. And it was incredibly cathartic to read those words, to read what we wrote in the book. We actually felt like we were testifying, which in many ways, because Dad pled not guilty and then changed his mind and pled guilty during the trial, he actually silenced us. So we didn't get to testify. We got an hour and 45 minutes. We didn't even make it to 1975. Only started in 1974. Damn. So it was really good and cathartic and therapeutic to actually read that. And we got Boris to do the bits where we gave mum right of reply. Boris is our Russian lad, and yeah, he's quite marked. So if you hear Boris's voice, it's a trigger warning. If we start going Russian, but we actually went back and we did pickups the week after the premieres, and pickups are where you go back and you muffed a word. So in 57,000 words, we muffed 42.
That's impressive.
That was it. Yeah, I was pleased with that. And Bernie, the guy in the recording studio, was like, for someone who's never done this before, you're incredible. I've had experts who've had more pickups than this.
Yeah.
But it was really, really good. And so we testified. We actually got to say the words, which is different from writing them. And so we're super excited that everybody's going to get to meet Happy and Maggot and Muscles and Linda and all the others, Judas particularly, and of course Symphony.
Yeah.
Because you're actually going to get to meet them, because you're going to hear the differences in the voice, and we actually say who is speaking. Makes it easier to just say, and here's Muscles, so that you know, because those voices can be very different.
Yes.
After all, you meet me and you'll go, hang on, she's not sounding the same no more. Yes, I got the supreme pleasure of speaking my mother's words. Yes.
Supreme pleasure, I'm sure.
Oh, supreme pleasure it was, yes. Because her perspective is not our perspective. But as I am responsible for looking after mother and have been for 55 years, it seemed appropriate that I would come to this. But I only emerged to talk to people in the last 6 months. So I'm not in documentary and I'm not in trial. And I love that they found something for me to do in documentary later, in the little videos we did, and something to do in reading the book. So I contribute.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
And just in case, I am Boris. You hear my voice? Take it as trigger warning, people. Now, we got them to work out how long the trigger segment works. And then I got to come back and say, this is triggering. If you don't want to hear it or take care of yourself, pick up in 10 minutes and 30 seconds. So you actually get the chance to jump forward and miss it. That was important. I wanted that for you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah. Triggers, not so funky, are they? Anyway, I think that's me done. I will go and let you have Jeni and whomever back. Hello, lovely to see you all. Bye. And so you get to hear that.
Yeah.
57,000 words. But it's the best bit of testimony because we actually got to tell. And telling is a very different process from writing it down. Somebody asked if they could have access to my 900,000 word police statement. No. You read that? No. I've got police officers that needed therapy after reading that document. I'm not letting somebody else with MPD read that. No, it's too traumatizing, because the police, they wanted every detail. When we wrote the book, we had to use words that were minimally traumatizing. Yeah. But, you had to be aware of your audience.
Yeah.
But no, the whole process of telling, everybody wanted to do that. It was wonderful. I think one of the best bits in the book is the back and forth dialogue between my alters and George. Because that's what happens in therapy.
Yeah.
And nobody sees that. It's like, can't you just have a magic pill and it'll go away? I don't want them to all go away.
Mm.
That's not what therapy for MPD should be about. It should be about recognizing that we are survivors of victims of crime,
Mm-hmm.
survivors of some of the worst crimes possible,
Mm-hmm.
and we should be getting help to get justice. And if that is not possible or not desirable, we should be helped to do what is possible and what is desirable for us as survivors. And I've had people who said to me, yeah, but you had this amazing police officer, and I'm never going to find a police officer as amazing as Paul Stamoulis. I'm saying, you don't need a police officer as fantastic as Paul Stamoulis. What you need is a cop that will listen to you, and a cop that if the police officer is out of their depth, can give Paul a call and say, help, because Paul's done that so many times already.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with George. George is virtually unavailable as a therapist these days because he's in court testifying for survivors, which was not an expected outcome of our trial.
No.
And I am incredibly grateful that George is standing up for people and being the expert witness.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's incredible. Writing the book with George was wonderful. I learnt a lot about George's process, and he learnt a lot about mine. And I didn't know that he was, shall we say, floundering at the beginning because he'd not done this before.
Yeah.
My goal going in was to tell.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell a man because, trigger warning, men have the equipment to do unto me what Dad did unto me. And therefore, I wanted to find out if a man said it wasn't right, it was illegal, it was wrong, it shouldn't have happened, it had greater impact for me than when a woman said it, because a woman couldn't do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there are people with MPD or DID out there that might feel the same way. And I would recommend strongly that if you need the validation of a man, it's worth investigating talking to a male therapist because it helps. And when we consider that most of the dynamic is male offender, female victim, it's valuable to then go and get therapy from the very gender that hurt you because it builds up your sense of safety. That being said, the converse is also true. If you are a male who was abused by a woman, then talking to a woman might actually be really helpful. So these are things that I would recommend that people with DID explore. But if you feel uncomfortable and you don't feel safe, you have every right to go, yeah, tried that. Nah, doesn't work for me. Because everything I say is just a suggestion of what worked for me. And I am not the template for MPD.
No, every system's different.
Everybody's different. And, sometimes it's really hard to explain that to therapists. Every system is different, and every system will develop in their childhood what they need to survive. And so, I've had people ask me, what are the names of your alters? But they've got to have a name, right? Well, as Symphony says, I needed a builder. I didn't need Bob the Builder. It's the simplest explanation I can give. People create what they need, and they don't necessarily think to name it. Which does take us to a big question. How do I know I've got 2,682 alters?
if they
Let's
don't
get
have
that
names.
one. I mean, it's really specific, isn't it? And my answer to this is we run a democracy. Everybody votes, and Muscles has created a unique voting chip for every altar. And so when we vote, they put their chip in the appropriate bucket. So he knows exactly who's voted and how they've voted, which means if somebody's voted, I need more information, it's not anonymous. You can go back, oh, look at the chip, and off you go. Funny story about this, though. People are like, you can't possibly know. Yeah, you can. However, we were sitting here maybe 2 months ago on the sofa talking to our counsellor about falling into the wall when we were a child. We mentally escaped into the wall. And I heard Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall. And I've heard Another Brick in the Wall for most of my life. And it's only, a tiny little bit of it. It's a snippet. And our counsellor said, well, can you talk to the wall? No, it's a memory. And then the wall spoke. And Muscles went nuclear because that's an additional unidentified altar, which makes us 2,683. And what we'd thought was a memory was actually an altar. And Symphony turned to him and looked at him, and she said, well, why do you think I keep singing Pink Floyd, The Wall? I don't sing The Wall. It's a memory. Oh, Muscles sat there muttering, that's 55 years of voting you have abstained from. So
why didn't you say anything?
That's not fair. So he went out and he said, you need a chip. So we now have a pink little brick wall about this big. And she now has her very own voting chip. So it's, how do we know? That's how we know.
But I think that's also important because it's something that a lot of multiples go through, where they feel like they have to learn about every single altar like immediately, straight away. And often like those parts, there can be parts and altars that are hidden away, or like that just don't, that like for whatever reason choose not to engage.
Or their job is so deep in the system that they don't actually deal with the outside world. I have a lot of people in what I call the channels. You saw them or you will see them in the documentary, because they've animated my channels, which is super scary. But anybody that's in those channels just is known as the smell guy, or the hearing guy, or the seeing guy. And there's hundreds of them. They're just the eye channel or the taste channel. They're so deep, they don't interact with the normal, they don't go to work, they don't write letters, they don't read books. They are there to block taste, smell, hearing, sight. They don't need to be out. And I think people who have complex polyfragmented systems like me, you're going to have people that you just don't engage with. And it's not being rude, it's simply they're busy doing their job, keeping the body running. I have 250 people who block pain. I never speak to any of them. I just know they exist. But we make what we need. We don't always label it, and we don't always give it names, and we don't always recognize that we've made one.
No. And I think it's important to acknowledge that you can still like learn more about yourself even after all of this. There's still stuff to know. There's still unknown things going on.
Absolutely. One of the things that's been really interesting for me is somebody wrote in a question, will you ever not have your multiples? Do you still switch now that the abuse is over? Do you ever think of getting rid of your alters? And somebody replied, not me, a external person replied, once you've learnt to cope by switching or by creating other alters, it's your way of dealing with things.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can continue to make alters because that's how you grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's something that a lot of people with MPD and DID do not get validated. So I wanted to bring that to your attention and say, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Symphony has not made a fresh alter since 1990 when we were 20.
Mm-hmm.
We came very, very close to making one when we fell and broke our wrist. And we could actually feel the system firing back up, which was great because it gave me a chance to see actually how it happens. And then we stopped it before we created the new altar because that friend that we were with at the time said, hey, you don't need to do that. I'm going to take you to hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what he saw, but he certainly saw something because his words were, you don't need to do that. I'm going to take you to hospital. So something was visible.
Yeah.
Actually, I have to go back and say, what the hell did you see? But hey, I was in hospital from Friday through to the following Thursday. So 6 days. I didn't get a chance to say to him, what did you see? But it's very true that how you react to things as a child
Mm-hmm.
will be the way you react to things as an adult. So if we switch as a child or we develop alters as children, that's our way of coping. And it is a healthy and legitimate way to engage with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
We are the healthy ones. For all everybody thinks that DID and MPD are disorders, they're healthy coping strategies to survive the worst the world can throw at you.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say to everybody that has DID and MPD, if you make an alter tomorrow, good for you. This is you dealing with stuff. Ashamed of your coping strategy. Feel angry at the abusers that forced you to do this,
Yes.
because this is not your shame. This is not your humiliation. This is not your fault. It's how you creatively survived. And if you hadn't, well, you'll be dead.
Mm.
MPD allowed us to survive the worst the world could lob at us. We're fucking heroes.
Yeah.
But it's true. We are heroes. And the thing is that people with MPD often have siblings, and what they did as children was done to protect their siblings,
Mm-hmm.
their non-offending parent, their pets.
Mm-hmm.
It's MPD is a protective thing where we're trying to protect other people, not just ourselves.
Yes.
And that makes us incredibly protective, caring individuals. We are not disordered. What happened to us is disordered,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not. You're not, and nobody with MPD or DID is disordered.
Yeah.
It's just they've got to find a word to stick on it. So we disordered because we got more than one personality. I've met other people that have only got one personality. Some of them would consider a bonus personality an upgrade.
There is
You
some
know,
talk.
wear them out.
I believe there is some talk about potentially changing it to dissociative identity response as opposed to disorder.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a disorder. What happened to us is disordered. What we did was survived, and we protected others through our survival strategy. We are heroes, and we need to flip the script.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to us is horrendous. We need justice. And that's why I went to court. That's why I waived my right to anonymity, because if I'd been anonymous, it would have been a 49-year-old woman was in court today. A 74-year-old man was in court today. I didn't want that. I wanted to be identified so that everybody knew what he did. And that meant that for the rest of my life, the rest of his life, the community was protected because they knew Richard John Haynes is a child molesting bastard. And everybody knows that now.
Yeah.
Whereas a 74-year-old man, I didn't know the story was going to be MPD. I'm just glad it was. I'm delighted it was because there, as I said, there's other people getting justice now who never thought they'd be able to do that.
Which is so good.
Very
so
proud of that.
You should be very proud.
So proud of that. Thank you.
I was very curious about what the reactions were to you sharing your story of about you and your plurality, because you mentioned in the book that there is a bully that you had in school that reached out to apologize at one point, and that's sort of like the main interaction, like personalized interaction that we get in the book is that. And I was just wondering whether the overall experience.
Oh, yeah, but we've
positive.
had so many different reactions. I'm delighted that the bully came out and spoke to me. We're still friends.
Oh.
I still watch him on Facebook. Yeah. We have little interactions along the way because he had the courage to come out and say, I didn't know this was happening at home and school should have been safe for you and I made it hell. And I'm so sorry. And that was really, really powerful for me. I've had teachers reach out to me from the various schools I was at. I've had teachers from Greenacre get in touch and say they didn't know, and if they'd known, if there had been any way they could have made it different or stopped it, they would have, but they just didn't know. And I've had friends come out to talk to me about things that I did as a child that I don't even remember doing. And yet the particular incident I'm talking about was a friend of mine was being abused in her own home, which I didn't know. And she ran away from home and stayed in my garage in the very space that I was abused in so frequently. And I smuggled food out to her. Wow. And I looked after her until we could get her safely to another family member's home. And she's been, how could you do that for me? How caring of you to do that for me when you yourself was being abused so badly. And you actually put me in the space, which was a really scary space for you. And if it would be lovely if I could remember it, but I don't. But she said I did it, and she has no reason to lie, so I did it. Being completely upfront, it sounds like me. It's something I would definitely do. I just don't remember doing it. But I've had so many positive responses. I've had people coming up to me in the street and hugging me. I've had people coming and telling their story to me. And I've had the opportunity to validate those people and actually say, what happened to you matters. You matter. I believe you. I hear you. I see you. You matter. And it's what I say to everybody. And it's not a frivolous statement. When I say this to anybody, I mean it, because these are the things that as survivors, we're not told. In fact, we're often told the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I've had some more challenging interactions. I had somebody on one of my posts, one of my recent posts, ask why I wasn't in jail or locked up. And I had to write, because I'm the victim, not the offender. Duh. But obviously they just come across this. They hadn't read it with any real care. They hadn't listened to what was actually being said, and they had just gone for the old, oh, well, you've got MPD, therefore you're crazy and should be locked up. But we're not crazy. None of us are crazy. In fact, I would say that people with MPD and DID are the most sane people you're going to meet, because we've had to be said. You can't afford to go lulu when your parent is abusing you. You can't afford to fall into insanity. You have to stay sane to protect the people around you. You can't afford to make it about you. Yeah. We're all out there protecting somebody else. You can't be protective and that kind of Lulu that needs to be locked up all at the same time. So, but yeah, apparently I should be in prison.
That's wild.
Or locked up for the crime of being sexually abused.
That's
and
wild.
You know the worst thing? Yeah, but the worst thing is that in the 70s and 80s, a large number of sex abuse survivors were locked up as crazy by their abusers. And my father told me that if I ever thought of telling, he would take me to a mental institution and they would electrocute me.
And that was like a very real threat. It's not
Exactly.
something that was just theoretical.
No, this was an absolute. 1982 he started this, along with the trigger warning, why haven't you done the decent thing and killed yourself yet? And trigger warning. Abusers set the narrative, and the abusers like to say that we are crazy, we are vindictive. You do realize that how stupid that is. In order to be vindictive, something has to have happened to make you vindictive, right? If you are vindictive, something happened. The mere fact that they've said you're vindictive admits
that something was done to you.
That you're telling the truth.
Yeah.
And abusers will traumatize you so much that you end up with mental health conditions, and then use those mental health conditions to invalidate you and say, well, you can't be believed because you're bipolar, you're schizophrenic, you're multiple, you're depressed, you have anxiety, all of which are the consequences of the abuse that you have had inflicted upon you. Now, you will have noticed I have included some things that we get misdiagnosed with in that statement.
Yeah.
One of the things that's difficult is that you can be schizophrenic and still have been abused. And paranoia, which is a key part of some aspects of schizophrenia, paranoia isn't paranoia when it's based on reality.
Yeah.
You can even be schizophrenic and multiple and a survivor.
Yes.
No mental health disorder precludes you from having been sexually abused in your childhood. Nothing. There is nothing that says you have this, therefore that. And so what if somebody's got DID, anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia? So what? Doesn't change the fact that they were abused as a child.
Yeah.
Oh, one of my chestnuts. Oh, you should have seen the chapter that we wrote about that in the book that we then had to edit.
but I do really appreciate that there was some inclusion of the impact, like the systemic impacts of things like false memory syndrome foundation,
Oh,
because of how much negative impact they have had systemically
yeah.
on like suppressing the stories of abuse victims.
Let's talk about false memory, the false memory brigade, I call them. Okay. Are you aware that the false memory dynamic was actually brought out and brought into existence by someone who was attempting to prove
That he wasn't an
that
abuser.
yeah,
Yeah.
false memory is only ever applied to abuse memories. It's never applied to armed robberies, vandalism, theft. No, it's only ever sex abuse cases, childhood sex abuse cases. And it's been invalidated for so long. After all, old mate Lizzie Loftus, okay, Elizabeth Loftus, the researcher that is the center of this, dear old Lizzie Loftus, she did a study attempting to state that you could implant memories into somebody's life. And the memory was getting lost in a mall. Well, getting lost in a mall is a lot different from trigger warning, remembering and re-experiencing anal or vaginal rape. It's the two don't stack up. And trauma memory is encoded in us based on not just what happens, but how it is handled within your personal world.
Yeah.
So when I went to my mother and said, Daddy hurt me, this was 1982, she said, I know, but it's over now. Okay, she didn't ask me how he'd hurt me. She didn't ask for any details at all. And so I was left feeling, well, my mum knows. It's okay. Mum says it's over now. Had my mother supported me and had my mother been able to ask questions of what was I talking about, maybe I could have answered those questions, and maybe how she reacted would not have led to me encoding this in my head. Mum knows. Because Mum was talking about a completely different thing from what I was talking about. And so I was left with Mum knows. She was left with, well, it's all right. It's all over now, isn't it? She was talking about a medical procedure. I was talking about rape. And because we couldn't communicate, we didn't meet in the middle. We literally were parallel lines. And I was left saying, well, I've told Mum and she knows. And it's all right because Mum says it's all over now. Mum knows. And she's left going, I don't know why you're making such a fuss about a health-related activity. Then my mother says, well, why didn't you tell me? You should have told me this was happening. I did.
Yeah.
So can I just a message to every person with DID and MPD who's watching this. You didn't fail to tell. You didn't fail to show what was happening to you. You lived in an environment where your disclosures were dismissed for whatever reason. When somebody says to you, and I'm sure you've all heard it, well, you should have told me. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me? You stop that immediately in your mind, and you are very clear. It wasn't your responsibility to tell.
Mm-hmm.
You were a child. You at 5 do not have the language of a parent in their mid-20s and upwards.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have the language. It's not your responsibility. It wasn't your job. You have survived. And that in itself is a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Do not let people put the blame on you, because they don't say, oh my God, that's terrible. How could I not see that? They don't go there. They
Mm-hmm.
go immediately and they put all the responsibility on us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not our responsibility. It wasn't my job. It was my family's job to go, she's bleeding. She's flinching. She's rocking backwards and forwards on a chair for upwards of 18 hours a day. I had the best pelvic floor muscles. I had the best stomach muscles as a kid. Oh my God, rocking is incredibly good for your core muscles. Yay. Unfortunately, it's also a sign of deep disturbance and distress in a child.
Yeah.
But no, they didn't notice that. Muscles will tell you, if you can rock at the right speed, you can literally fly out of your body and land wherever the hell you want to be. And you've left your body completely sitting there doing the rocking and you're not in it anymore. I think that might count as a dissociated identity, but hey, who knew?
Yeah,
But
I've had
please,
that form of dissociation where you're not here anymore. You're over there.
yes, I'm over there. I'm sitting on a swing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no there. But what we need to do is understand that when adults put the blame on us, they are not supporting the abuser, even though it feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This was something that was really hard for me to understand, is when adults say, oh, I know your dad, he wouldn't do that. That doesn't mean that they're declaring you a liar. They are trying to process what you've told them, and they've gone for the easiest automatic response. Why didn't you tell me?
It
But
creates
he's
a
nice to me.
it
You know,
creates a cognitive
your dad's
dissonance.
your dad's lovely to 35-year-olds. Yeah, he was just not safe around 3-year-olds. I have had some difficulties recently because they've bulldozed the house where it all happened.
Oh.
Yeah. That was challenging.
Yeah.
It was really challenging. I did not know how to handle that. And it was just quietly bulldozed 6 months after my father got his prison term. Put a beautiful house there now. It looks like two shoe boxes sitting on top of each other. My dad would hate it. It's perfect. So, yeah, in terms of reaction, we've had some interesting reactions over the years. In the 6 years, I think the biggest reaction we get is, where was your mother? Followed rapidly by, did he abuse your siblings? But I understand that. But the problem is, if you have siblings and you're multiple, often you can hear, did he hurt your siblings, as though your siblings are more important than you are.
Yeah.
It isn't important what happened to you, but it is important. It would be important. We'll care about it if it happens to your brother or your sister, which is actually a really pervasive thought process.
Yeah.
And when we're told that we don't matter and nobody's ever going to care, you can tell anybody you want, no one's ever going to care that it happened to you, and you're met with, did he abuse your siblings too? That validates. Yeah. And this is something that is really tricky. When it comes up in therapy, this is really hard. And George Blair-West and I had multiple disagreements as people with MPD. You're going to meet this. And I just want everybody to be prepared that this doesn't invalidate you. It's trying to open the dialogue. But what it does is it opens the dialogue about your siblings, and it doesn't open the dialogue about what happened to you.
Yeah, it kind of closes that down.
It does. It closed it down. In the book, I talk extensively about some of the more indelicate things I had with the sexual assault support service, which was dangerous, damaging, and set me back for decades. So I think it's important that we recognize that sometimes people don't respond in the way that is the most needed by us. They don't know how to deal. And sometimes it's easier to talk about whether or not your brother was abused than it is to talk about what actually happened. Yeah. Because a lot of the stuff that happens to people with MPD, DID, is so outrageously extreme and abnormal that it's easier to dismiss it than to actually deal with it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of mental fortitude to be able to incorporate the ideas being presented when you are met with like extreme childhood abuse, and incorporating that into your worldview is very difficult for the average person.
Yes, and unfortunately, there's a large number of people in the counseling and therapy world that they come from worlds that are so different from what I've lived that we're not even talking the same English. And I'm not saying that you need to be a survivor in order to provide therapy, because
that would really cut down the pool.
Well, also, that would also set up a case of triggers.
Yeah.
You know, you've been abused in one way, you're triggered. You trigger your patient, they trigger you. And it just, it's the only way you can actually work with survivors, if you're a survivor yourself, is if you've actually had a chance to work on your own stuff.
Yeah.
But of course, that means that you're going to meet people who are in their 40s and 50s as therapists, rather than people that are your own sort of age group. And so we've now got generational differences. It just gets messy.
Yeah.
But when you have a counselor who thinks that she understands what you have experienced as a survivor of 14 years of sexual abuse because she had a car accident and killed her husband, we are not talking apples and apples. I mean, there is no correlation between what I experienced and what she experienced. And there was no way that her experience of having that car accident was going to help her to help me with being a victim of sex abuse. And yet that's what she told me. And I just sat there going, really? Are you sure? I mean, yeah, if it was a deliberate act, she definitely knows how my abuser might feel as a perpetrator of a criminal act. But even then, she's not even in the same ballpark as my dad. So there's a lot that happens in the therapy world that is difficult. And they're all well-meaning and they're all trained, at least in some way. But we would all benefit from having access to people with lived experience, which is why I'm doing this today and why I've done all the others, because we can actually send psychologists and counselors and therapists, go watch Jeni Haynes,
Yes.
and learn what NPD's really like, and then come back and help me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important
See,
to
my
have all
goal
of
is
these.
absolutely, my goal is to make everything easier for you guys. You know, I've referred to going through the legal system as hacking my way through with a scythe.
Mm-hmm.
I've hacked the path. Now you guys get to walk behind me. Please walk behind me. Use my stuff. Use my case as a precedent. Use my book, my documentary, my audiobook. Use the 60 minutes documentary. Use it all. Validate yourselves with what I've told you and what I've put out there. Because if it means that you don't have to disclose your abuse 1,000 times, what Muscles refers to as the butt naked Watusi. If you don't have to do that, even once, one less time, it's an improvement,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So get it out there.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to do some trauma conferences and talk to people who are doing therapy for people who have experienced trauma in the pre-verbal years,
Mm.
which basically means everybody with MPD and DID. So I'm talking to my tribe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for leading the way. Thank you for making the path.
Oh yeah, it's not been fun, but it's been done, so
Mm-hmm.
that's good. I mean, I didn't know that when I went to the police, it was to take 10 long years
Mm.
to get justice.
You talk in the book and in the documentary about how you talk about um, waiving your right to anonymity during your father's trial in Australia. And I was wondering what that decision was like, whether there was sort of a back and forth that you had, whether it was just a firm decision from the get-go that you decided up front, or whether it's something that was decided later on. What was that like?
Okay, waiving my right to anonymity was a universal decision. Everybody was on board with this decision.
That's amazing.
And we made it abundantly clear to the police in 2009 that we intended to do this. Even back in 1996, 97, I wanted to make Dad public so that
Mm-hmm.
it would protect any further victims. Mm-hmm. And Princess Diana died. Completely fucked my chance of getting Dad in the media because we flew in the day of Diana's funeral.
Oh no. That would have
All
been
the
chaotic.
media, you couldn't get public transport.
Yeah.
There were thousands of people at the airport who couldn't leave because the tube trains weren't running, the taxis weren't running, the buses weren't running.
No, everything shuts down.
We were lucky we were picked up at the airport because we'd still be standing there. So that was fun. Yeah, so unfortunately, the Diana media storm meant that Dad wasn't reported on. And so he wasn't outed, which meant that when he came out of prison in 2004, I had to fight all over again because nobody knew him.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, nobody was protecting the population from him.
Mm-hmm.
So that led to us being absolutely determined when we did it again that we were going to out him. Now, the police said, don't say anything. One word from you could kill the case. Don't talk. But they didn't mean it the way I took it. Now, I'm literal minded.
Mm. I
think that this is something that is very common in our tribe, is that we're literal minded. So I'm not the only person that would have heard don't talk mean don't say anything to anybody ever. Mm-hmm. And that meant that I couldn't get counselling. I couldn't get support from my friends because I wasn't allowed to tell them what was happening. if you go to the police, when they say don't talk, they don't mean you cannot tell your friends, you cannot reach out for help. Let's not
They
walk
should
that road. I've
clarify
walked
that.
it for you. Yeah, let's clarify. They mean don't talk about going to the police to somebody who could give that information to your abuser.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have family members that are in contact with your abuser, you don't tell them what's going on, and you don't tell anybody who would tell them.
Mm-hmm.
You protect the police case because it's the best case of getting justice if you can do that. But it doesn't mean you can't tell your friend that you went to write your police statement and it's really devastating you, and you're shaky and you just need a cuddle.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't stop you from saying, I've had a shit week, to your friends. Can we just go to the movies? And I took it as don't say anything to anybody.
Yeah, you can't let
They
anybody know
didn't.
anything.
Exactly. So if you take the justice path, and I hope at least some of you will because it's worth it, be mindful to clarify with the police officer when they say you can't talk about your evidence, to whom, under what circumstances, what are you allowed to talk about?
Ask follow-up questions.
Because this is something I'm hoping to do some training with the police about, to say, hey, we take it literal, guys.
Yeah.
You know, I went mute on the whole topic, and it was hard. And it meant that as I said to you before, this is why when everybody pulled out the Christmas week, 6 weeks before Dad's trial, it tipped me over the edge because I hadn't been allowed to speak to my friends. I didn't have people that I could go to and cry on their shoulders. I had become necessarily isolated. So back to waiving my right to anonymity. Slight detour, folks, but hey. So when I went to the police in 2009,
mm-hmm.
I didn't know how long it was going to take.
Yeah.
And I did absolutely everything that the police told me to do, no matter how hard it was. I mean, check out that police walkthrough. Holy shit, that was a tough day. But I did it because I wanted to make it real.
Mm-hmm.
So if the police asked me to do something, I did it. When it got sent to the prosecution, I did everything the prosecutors asked me to do, and I still kept it silent. So in January of 2019, I sent a letter to the police, the prosecutors, and the bigwig in the Department of Public Prosecution, the boss. And I said, I have done everything that you have asked me to do at great personal cost.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have done everything. I have done every single thing you've wanted me to do, and I've not done what you've asked me not to. I ended up having to have an online relationship with my father for 4 years during the investigation, simply so that Dad wouldn't get the idea that I was going for justice. So that was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you all know what it would be like to actually have to play pretty with your abuser. It's hard. And then I had to not tell him about medical things that were going on. I had to keep things secret, particularly the colostomy, because the colostomy was great legal evidence. So I said, I've done all of that. I've done everything you asked me to do at great personal cost. I want to waive my right to anonymity. Most empowering moment in the 10-year investigation was that. And they went, okay. So we walk into court on day one, and we sit in the room with Judge Sarah Huggett. Oh, she's divine. That woman she's divine. She was so understanding, and she was so moderate in how she treated both me and my father. She was very clearly neutral. And I loved that. She gets in and she sits down and she says it's a sex crime trial. So, of course, the usual protections will be applied. And Sean Hughes, the prosecutor, got up and said, I have instructions. Didn't realise I'd been instructing him. bear in mind, once we don't get lawyers in any of this. The police, they have lawyers. The prosecution, they have lawyers. The defendant, he gets a lawyer. We're just witnesses.
Yeah.
From the moment we submit the last page of our statement, we move from being victims to being witnesses, and witnesses don't have lawyers. So it was tricky. So when he said, I have instructions, I was like, okay. And he spelt out, I wanted to waive my right to anonymity. So the judge asked me about this, and she asked me, do you need time to think about this? And my line was, I've had 23 years to think about this. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I want to waive my right to anonymity. Because as I stood up and said this, there were 2,682 alters in that courtroom, and they all were there. So when we put our hand up to make the oath, you know how you go into court and you make the oath. It's put your hand on the Bible or swear the oath. Well, we swore an oath.
Yep.
Don't have a great relationship with Jesus. He and I are going to have a chat when I get upstairs. Yeah. He was on vacay for the whole of the 70s and the 80s. So, so every single one of us swore the oath and waived our right to anonymity. And then next step is, well, you've waived your right to anonymity, sure, but we'll still give you the protections that the media can't be here when you testify. No, I don't want that. I want the media in here. I want them in. I want them to report on this. I want everybody to know what he did. I didn't know the story would become Jeni Haynes as MPD. I thought it was going to be Richard John Haynes, sex offender, child molester of the 9 hells. I didn't know the story was going to be me. I thought it would be him, but didn't think that one through, did I? But hey, I'm delighted with how it worked. But no, there it was on the news. They said his name. They showed pictures of me, and they said the magic words, multiple personality disorder as a result of being a victim of crime. I loved it. And then there's pictures of me outside the court. There's footage of me walking in. There's a beautiful bit of Linda talking on camera where she says, if you're going to do this, we will remember. We will tell, and you will go to jail. So proud of Linda for that, because that's just every sex offender's on notice now. And we hope that we are every sex offender's worst nightmare. Because I'm not going nowhere. I'm going to be banging on about this until I'm dead.
I love that as well. Like how empowering it is for it to, like, the focus to have shifted away from your father to you, though. It's essentially like you were able to come in and be the main character of your story finally. I know that that's something that a lot of multiples really struggle with. We feel like secondary characters a lot of our lives.
Oh, I refer to this as being a bit player in my own life. So it's very validating for me to hear that I'm not the only person with MPD DID that feels that way.
Yeah.
The minute they arrested him, it all became about his rights. He didn't have to answer questions. He didn't have to do a police interview. He didn't have to justify his behavior. He could just sit there and say, I didn't do it. He didn't have to get up and bloody testify. The anonymity laws make it really difficult for victims to actually be heard, to be validated, because it feels like a institutional silencing of the victims. And so when somebody comes out with a story like mine and talks about trigger warning, being abused with objects, being anally raped with a soldering iron, support staff sit there going, oh my God, this can't possibly be real because we've never heard anything like it. But if you put a group of people with MeDID in the room and ask them to tell you their worst act of abuse, you're going to hear things like the soldering iron, because what happens to us is so extreme. But we're dismissed because it's not talked about. And why is it not talked about? Because we're protecting the victim by giving them automatic anonymity, which in cases of abuse where the abuser is the parent or a parental figure, they get instant anonymity. And then things like what happened to me don't get discussed. So I've had counsellors say to me, how did being sexually abused cause you to need a colostomy?
That's what I feel like that's a pretty easy thing to put together.
No, it wasn't. She didn't understand at all. And in the end, Muscles rocked up and said, 14 years to rape up the arse, does it? Oh, dear.
Yeah.
And we're like, Muscles, shush, go to the beach. This is why Muscles is on time delay. We have a strategy whereby Muscles says something and it'll take anything from 15 minutes to 24 hours before it comes out of my mouth. We put him on time delay. Somebody asked, have you ever been able to silence your alters? And I had fun talking about time delay. But yeah, the thing is that the system is set up to protect victims. That's what they think they're doing. But in cases where it's the parents, it actually protects the abuser more than it protects the victim, because you'll have people say, well, if it was bad, surely it would have been on the news. If it had been as bad as you make out, the media would have been there and the media would have reported on it. If it's as bad as you say, the doctors would have told me. Tell me you do not understand anonymity. Way to go.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it protects the abuser. And that's what I really want to stop. And the thing is, the world is never going to get better in the way it treats survivors until survivors stand up and say, fuck you, I want people to know. Because the first thing that happens when you disclose, now this is for any victim of any abuse, men, women, boys, girls, and those of us who choose not to be of a gender at all, my not girls, and a large part of the trans community. We need to sit there and go, how are we treated when we disclose? Which we're asked, what were you wearing? Why did you go there? Why didn't you tell? Oh, it can't have been that bad. And if you're a boy, I'd have loved to have had a teacher like that when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Excuse me. A boy has just told you that he was abused and you've just gone, your first choice was jealousy?
Yeah, that's so
Fucking
messed up.
hell. Yeah. Yeah. I will. One of my big things is I really object to this artificial divide between male survivors and female survivors, because ultimately sex abuse isn't actually about sex. It's not about the orientation of the victim. It's about power. It's about a weak, ineffectual human being of any stripe seeking to feel powerful. And so they weaponize their anatomy while victimizing a child's anatomy. It's an act of violence in which the weapon is anatomy. Therefore, put boy and girl survivors in the same room and it will kill this "I must have been giving off gay signals" bullshit that is dumped on male survivors. And it'll stop the men are perpetrators, women are victims dynamic, that, while truthful in one way, it's not for child sex abuse. It is not about gender or gender identity of the victim. It's about power and how an adult is seeking to obtain power through violating a child. And it's so important that we get that.
Yeah.
When we teach children sex ed, we need to include consent as part of that discussion, and what consent looks like and sounds like, and what lack of consent looks like and sounds like. If we start teaching kids at 5, then we're going to, even before then, parents can teach, not about if you're having sex, you can say no, but people have to ask you if they want to touch you. You have the right to say no. We will reduce the number of rapists in maybe 30 years because they'll have grown up with the idea of consent as foundational, not just in sex, but in every sphere. If you want that candy, you ask consent. You ask for it. You seek consent before you touch somebody's hair. If we have these dialogues at a young age, we could wipe out rapists, and then we'd be left with only rapists who understand consent and refuse to use it. And that makes them deliberately not seeking consent. And if it's part of everything we teach kids, everything, even down to touching the puppy, may I touch your puppy? Consent has to be at the center of everything. And it can be done in a way that it is central, but without being a special phrase or a special thing you do. Teaching our kids to ask, teaching our kids to check in with one another is simple. We just have to do it.
And it's also important to acknowledge that no is a valid answer to that as well.
No is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody says no, or I don't think so, or I guess so, if you hear I guess so, that's a no. Okay, so we need the language. And the earlier we can give the children the language, the better off they're going to be. But, you know, I've seen some programs where it's put directly on the child to stop the abuse. Why didn't you stop it? That's a question I was asked. Why didn't you stop it? I was under the age of 1 when it started. I didn't even have dada.
What do you mean? Couldn't say anything.
Can't say.
Tiny
And this
child.
is something that, yeah, this is something that really gets my goat is adults talk to me as a, let's say, talk to me as a 22-year-old, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And they say to me, well, why didn't you tell me? And so they act as if the adult in front of them is the size and shape the child was.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
It's something that happens a lot. Adults will look at you. Oh, I was abused when I was 3. Well, why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you say no? Excuse me.
Did you
I
hear what I
actually
said?
have had to. I've actually had to take photos and put them on my phone. So when somebody says to me, "Well, why didn't you say?" I can say, "No, no, 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 no. It didn't happen to this body in this size. It happened to that little girl."
Yeah, and you've
Oh,
included photos in the book as well, which I
yeah,
thought was really
yeah.
important.
There's a photo of Linda. Um, she's got bangs and her hair curving like this. And she's 5 going on 30. She's got the glasses and she looks like a 30-year-old. I just look at her and go, oh, Linda, you were 30 at 5. This is very cool. And, so I can look at it, but the body
Yeah.
and the mind is 5. This whole thing about why didn't you tell? We almost project adulthood on babies
Mm-hmm.
as if the minute you're sexually abused, you must be over 18 within seconds and you've got the language to say, hey, stop.
Mm-hmm.
I said stop. I said no. I said, please don't. Every day for 14 years, he made choices. Nobody ever says to me, oh my God, that bastard did that deliberately. He must have made choices to do that. He must have thought about it. No, it's why didn't you tell me? And so survivors are left with this ocean of guilt about not telling in a way that adults could understand.
As if it's on the
I said,
child to be able to communicate in languages like that they don't fully
yeah,
comprehend yet.
that's right. And when I wrote my police statement, I wrote what he did in the language I had at the time. He raised up like an elephant's trunk.
Mm-hmm.
But people want me to say, trigger warning, he got an erection.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that's what it was. After all, when I went to see the police in 2009, okay, I'm now 39 years old, okay, 2009. I walk in and I sit down and Rod Messer says, did you ever see his penis? And I say, no. And then I produced 12 beautiful diagrams of his penis, but I didn't know that's what it was called.
Yeah.
At 39, I still did not know what it was called. How dumb can you be?
I
But
feel
I
like that's a real
wasn't
failure of the
dumb.
education.
Yeah, yeah. But you see, so when I'm talking and when any alter, any multiple, any of their alters are talking, they're talking at the age that they are. So
Mm-hmm.
if I've got a 4-year-old, she's got the mind of a 4-year-old.
And
And
yeah, that
you could actually
language.
see, yeah, so the language changes. You can actually see, although I'm not giving it out, you just take my word for it.
Mm-hmm.
In my police statement, you can see me developing language and changing how I describe what happens. Like a snake splitting its skin is something else I used. But at no point did I write the word penis.
Mm.
Because I didn't have that word.
No.
Didn't have that word at 39. So, oops. But we're going to disclose as children in the language we have at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can give children real language as we bring them up, we teach them about consent. We give them the right names for their anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
We say we've had an accident rather than a boo-boo. We change the language. we can then make this world a much better place for survivors and hopefully reduce or minimize the number of new survivors we have going forward.
Yes.
You know,
are there any memoirs or documentaries that you would like to recommend, whether they're about DID or MPD or not?
Ooh. So now I've been thinking about this a lot. When you first sent the question, I was like, what? There are some podcasts and there are some things on YouTube that I found particularly helpful. I found, going back to Billy Milligan, I found watching the interviews with Cornelia Wilbur, which are available on YouTube, really, really useful, because you do see him switch. You feel him switch. And as if somebody's out there going, I don't know what switching looks like, even in myself or in somebody else, actually watching Billy switch was really valuable. And I mean, I absolutely am frustrated with Billy for a whole range of reasons, but that footage taken as therapeutic footage, you get to meet different alters and you actually get to hear the changes in their vocal tones. The way they sit is different. It's like watching yourself, because that's what we all do. When we switch, all of us change how we sit, we change how we move, we change how we use the body. And Billy was in a contained environment and being filmed from every angle. And he was switching. And if you ignore the whole insanity thing and you just focus on the presentation of MPD, it's incredibly validating and it's real. There's, and here somebody inside is going very much for Rabbit. When Rabbit Howls. When Rabbit Howls is a walk and talk and trigger warning, but it's very useful in that it actually describes some of what was done, but a lot of what was said. And so when you listen to the stepfather, you're hearing the kinds of things that family members say. You are hearing and seeing the way you can be twisted into believing that you're the one who's nutty. And if it had been done to any other human being, they would have been you that has the problem, which is what I felt for decades. You know, I just felt, you know, what happened to me was yuck. But, you know, if it had happened to anybody else, they'd been chill. Clearly not. But these are the kind of mental contortions we grow up with. I also found the discussion of therapy very useful. And the fact that Trudy Chase labeled her psychiatrist. She gave him a name that was not his. And so he was Stanley for her. And it didn't matter what his real name was. All the way through, he's Stanley, because that is how she could control her environment. For whatever reason, she chose to take control of her therapy to the extent that she actually changed the name of her therapist and referred to him throughout as Stanley, which I wouldn't recommend
Mm.
as as something that all multiples do when they go into therapy. But it was interesting that as she went through therapy, her first step was to control her environment.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes therapy can be very scary.
Mm.
All right, every time therapy is scary. And starting with a new therapist is terrifying.
Yes.
And so to watch how she controlled what was in her mind uncontrollable, it was out of her control. What he thought, what he said was out of her control. So she controlled part of it by changing his name.
Mm.
It's a teeny tiny step. And it's like when we walked in to see Dr. George Blair-West, all we wanted was the diagnosis. We hadn't thought past that.
Yeah.
We just wanted the diagnosis. They were standing up ready to go.
Yeah, no,
And he says, I can help you with that.
I did love that part of the book because it was sort of like I like you already knew, but you just needed somebody else to validate it, and then you could be like, okay,
Absolutely.
all I needed.
Yeah, I'm done. Thanks very much. I've got the diagnosis. Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
And I loved in Trudy how she talked about outside of the therapeutic hour,
Mm-hmm.
which is where we started our conversation
Yeah.
earlier today, is that MPD is never ending.
Yep.
Um, there are some books I don't recommend.
Okay.
There's a book called The First Sin of Ross, somebody or other. Don't read it
Okay.
because it turns our MPD into a sin.
Mm.
We are sinful, and that's why we have multiple personalities. Don't go there. It's just, we are not sinful. We are sinned against.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm old school, there's a huge array of books out there since I was reading, and I haven't sat down and read much on MPD recently. I've got mountains to read about. But there's a thing called, I think Maggie has done a book called Split,
Yeah,
and then
I have
she's done,
got that
yeah.
one.
Oh, good. Well, I would recommend that people look at that because that is ultra modern.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also done a new book that's coming out about being a mother
I've got that one too.
and having DID.
I've had her on the podcast already, so
Oh, how
yeah.
wonderful. Oh, that's just amazing. We've chatted back and forth on email a couple of times, but we just haven't managed to get in the same city at the same time.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm very, very pro Maggie. She also has worked with George, which, he is now getting to be the go-to face for DID.
Mm.
But yeah, I am very pro Maggie and very supportive of her work. And for people who are looking at the lived experience of DID and motherhood, I think that that's an updated version of the chunks in When Rabbit Howls by Trudy Chase about her experiences of being a mother in the 70s
Okay.
and trying to negotiate DID and children.
That's awesome. I
So,
definitely will have
yeah.
to check out When the Rabbit Howls. I had heard about it like vaguely before, but it's yeah, I will have to
There's
check it
a
out.
book and then there's the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I strongly recommend start with the book.
Yeah, always.
Because when you read the book, she tells you her motivation. She tells you what she's thinking. When you see it in a documentary or a movie, you don't always get what was going on in the head.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to Stanley, she actually discusses in her book why she called him Stanley. But if you watch the film, you get, well, I'm going to call you Stanley. No understanding why. It just is said. And so as a person who's looking at this, why on earth would somebody call them by something that isn't their name? But once you read the book, it all makes sense. She's controlling her environment, which she doesn't say, but I do. Yeah. We all have our therapy related rituals.
It's very true.
Yeah. Couldn't do George unless I went and had pancakes with chocolate, melted chocolate afterwards. That was you've got through therapy, now you can have a treat.
I love that. That's such a good treat.
Yeah, fantastic. So although I haven't read very far into Maggie's book, and I got to be honest about that, I haven't read very far, mainly because it was triggering, and I was not in a space because I was in the process of doing filming for the documentary. Yeah. But I would definitely support that. And then there's the story of the survivors of Malka Leifer. Are you familiar with
Don't
her?
know that I've heard of that at all. No.
If we're looking at supporting victims and we're looking at supporting survivors outside of the family unit, one of the worst cases that I'm aware of is the case of Malka, Maika, Leifer, Leifer. She was the headmistress of a Jewish school in Melbourne, and she sexually abused some of the children.
Wow.
When the children began to make complaints, she fled to Israel, and they've had years and years of attempting to get her back to face justice, which parallels my experience. But they talk about how the community supported the perpetrator over the victims. And I think that while that is triggering, it is also validating for anybody else who has attempted to tell and been shot down in flames by the community standing up for the adult. And so there's a documentary which I would recommend, and I believe the girls have a book out. And this also talks about the sister where there were two sisters. Malka Leifer was found guilty of abusing one and not guilty of abusing the other. And this goes back to what I was talking about in terms of insufficient evidence and the trauma that kind of judgment can give the victim, and how we can actually sit down with victims and say, we are expecting historic abuse survivors to provide an incredible standard of evidence. And when that evidence isn't available, it doesn't mean that you weren't believed, and it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. I have no doubt whatsoever that the allegations of those three girls are truthful. And they have my complete support. And I would strongly recommend them. And I believe that the documentary is on Netflix at the moment.
Amazing. I'll definitely have to look forward to that.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And
I was just disgusted that an entire community would prioritize the protection of a alleged abuser over the amount of trauma that they were inflicting on the alleged victim. And even if the children weren't telling the truth, the process should have happened so we could have knocked that out of the park, dealt with it and moved on and stopped the trauma for everybody. But when you have to wait decades for justice, and remember, out of every 100 people every 100 cases, only 2 make it to court. It's disgusting.
It is.
Go for justice, ladies, gentlemen.
No, but I very much am keen to try to uplift own voices stories, people telling their stories,
Mm.
even when they're messy and they don't have like quote unquote happy endings. It's really important
Mhm.
that we still hear them and what they went through.
It would, yeah, be interesting to talk to the sisters,
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm Lifers victims, because they know that they're out and about at the moment, and they're talking about what happened, and they're talking about the impact of the different verdicts. So it
Mm-hmm.
might be, you might like to talk to them. They're very cool girls. Very, very proud of them.
I want to thank Jeni for sitting down with me and letting me interview her, and for spending so much time with me for this little podcast. I really appreciated it. The second part of this interview will come out with the We Are Jeni review in the next podcast episode. I can highly recommend The Girl in the Green Dress. It provides such immense detail about Jeni's life and the complexities that come with that and living as a multiple. Like I said earlier, my one relatively minor nitpick is Dr. George Blair-West sections, but I do think overall the story of Jeni is so valuable to have been told that I am glad that it is out there in the world, and that Jeni and Symphony and the rest of the alters were able to tell their story. For these reasons, I give the book a 5 out of 5 for multiplicity representation. This book represents a real lived experience of multiplicity, showing the humanity and the nuance and the complexity that comes with that. And that is absolutely invaluable. But tell me, have you read The Girl in the Green Dress? What did you think of it? I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have any comments or suggestions for topics to cover on MeDIDa, or if you'd like to be a guest on an episode, you can contact us on medida@gmail.com. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Avodacat, where I will be uploading episodes. You can also find us on Instagram, MeDIDa Podcast, and Facebook, me.didea. I've been Avodacat, this has been MeDIDa, and it is time to switch out.